right, greetings everyone. This is, I think this is lesson 5. In our last lesson, we were able to get into lesson 3, and I think we finished up our short story, which was at the bottom of page 20 in our textbook, and then we repeated some of the expressions that were made by the writings of Moses concerning the creation, when Moses wrote Vahi Erev, Vahi Boker Yom Sheni, which is there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And then we proceeded on into lesson 3, and we finished up the evening last week at the bottom of page 29. The bottom of page 29. And as I've mentioned so many times, and I hope you've had a chance to read what I read to you last week out loud, what I'm going to do in this first lecture for this week is repeat the reading, because what I want to emphasize is you're not at this, if you don't feel like you're understanding all that you're reading, that's good, and that's expected at this stage of learning biblical Hebrew, because the author's approach here is not so much that you are learning the vocabulary and the sentence structure at this point, as you are recognizing the sound of the biblical language, and also the syllable division, the pronunciation of the vowels, and also the recognition of the letters. That is much more important at this stage than knowing the vocabulary and the sentence structure. However, in my lectures, of course, I will share more with you concerning sentence structure and vocabulary and vowel structure than what the textbook reveals to us. But the expectation of understanding it at this point is not there. So I wanted to share that with you as a little bit of comfort, because I know that when I was reading last Thursday night, some of you, if not all of you, felt kind of lost. And I just wanted to let you know that feeling lost like that is not that unusual at this stage in learning what is very much a foreign language. We were able to pick up Greek a little faster than Hebrew, because about 60 or 65% of our English words come from the Greek language. So early on, we were able to pick up our Greek vocabulary a lot faster than we do our Hebrew vocabulary. So in addition to that, I want to share with you, I think we talked last week about having the midterm. The midterm is scheduled at the end of lesson 3, which we will try to complete today. But what I want to do is review with you, and I'd like to postpone the midterm until November the 3rd, not November the 27th, as we talked about last week. And the reason for that is I want us to have another night together so that we are reviewing and finishing up lesson 3, and then moving on into lesson 4. And I'd like to introduce lesson 4 next week, and then take the midterm on November the 3rd. So the first hour of November the 3rd is when we'll take the midterm. Now let me talk about the midterm for a little bit and what the expectation is. You are to know the alphabet just like we learned in September. We took about 3-4 weeks to learn the alphabet. So you would be expected to be able to list the vocabulary, the alphabet, and the first expectation is that you're giving me the Hebrew letters and what the equivalent English letter would be, which is called transliteration. And then out to the right of that, the name of the letter itself. So that would be, so I've already given you the answer, right? For nearly half of the exam will be the Hebrew alphabet. Also recognition of the Hebrew vowels, the recognition of the Hebrew vowels. You don't have to recall what the Hebrew vowels are. I'll give those to you. But you need to recall what the name of the Hebrew vowel is and its English equivalent. So that's part of it. And as far as vocabulary and translation, there will be some vocabulary on the exam. And there will be some of the words that we've learned in the first 3 lessons, simple words, such as the name for God, name for word, the definite article, things like that will be on the exam. And also, as far as translating sentences are concerned, the expectation is if you can translate them, great. If all you can do is transliterate them, that is fine as well on the first exam. And what I mean by transliteration is that when you're reading the Hebrew, if you give me the English equivalent of what those letters represent, then you'll be getting at least half credit. Full credit would be translating, and they'll all be simple sentences that we have gone over more than once in class. And they'll be simple, pulling from the vocabulary, and that will be the midterm. The midterm shouldn't take more than 30-35 minutes to complete. And then the second hour of November the 3rd, we will go into lesson 4. And then November the 10th, we will review lesson 4 and finish lesson 4. And then on November the 17th, we'll do lesson 5, start lesson 5. And of course, the following Thursday would be Thanksgiving. And then December the 1st, we will finish lesson 5 and begin lesson 6. And lesson 5 and lesson 6, by the way, are fairly long lessons. So we'll have to move fairly rapidly in that time frame. And then on November the 8th, we'll finish lesson 6, and then we'll come back together on, that's December the 8th. December the 1st, we'll finish lesson 5 and begin lesson 6. December the 8th, we will finish lesson 6, and then December the 15th, we will take the final. All right, so that's that. Okay. I have the listing of the vowels. I hope you're keeping that with you, because it'll take some time referring back to them, back to this list, reading, referring back to grasp the vowel structure. All right. With that in mind, let's do a review time. And review is, of course, very important in learning a language. You're not going to read a lesson or a chapter and know it. So going back and reviewing is extremely important. So let's begin with 3.2, or at the bottom of page 25. And again, I will read the Hebrew, and you look at the Hebrew this time, not the English. You look at the Hebrew and follow along with me. So what I will do is read the Hebrew and then the English translation immediately after the phrase. All right, so let's begin. Vayelek, Haish El Haisha. And the man went to the woman. And notice that the phrase began with a verb, and then the noun came after the verb. So it's Vayelek, Ha-ish. Notice the ha at the beginning. Ish is the Hebrew word for man. The ha is the Hebrew word for the definite article the. So you have Vayalek, and he went. Lek being the verb went. And he went, or the man went. And then El is the preposition here, is the preposition that tells us that ha-isha is the indirect object, and ha again is the definite article, and isha, as we know from our vocabulary, is woman. So you have ish, which is man, and then isha is woman. And you notice the dot in the middle of the shin, the letter shin, and which is the dogish, and then you see the gamuts underneath it. Notice the dot to the right over the shin, which tells us that it's shin and not sin. If it's sin, it's only pronounced as an S. All right, let's go down to the next verse. All right, so you have va davir. Va davir lahi. Notice, okay, lay more. All right, so let's go back and look at each one of these words again. So you have va. Notice that it stopped right there. The syllable stopped right there. I need to stop there because of the schwa that's underneath the yod. All right, so you have a consonant, vowel, consonant, stop. All right, so it's not pronounced as vaya davar, which, by the way, is the way I pronounced it when I first started taking Hebrew and reading this text, until I was corrected by my professor. It is va davir. Va davir. Okay, and notice the patak underneath the daleth, and then the dot in the middle of the bait. The dot in the middle of the bait, which again is the dogish, and that changes it from a V sound to a V sound, and of course it ends in a consonant, which is the resh. All right, so it is va dabir. Okay, lahi. Notice we've learned that the lamed is the often used as a prefix, which means to, the preposition to. And then we've also learned that the hey with a dot in the middle of it makes it feminine. So it's to her. All right, so, and he spoke to her, and then lamor. Actually, the lamor here is to say, which is an infinitive structure. You're not to understand that yet, but just hear it. Okay, so it's lamor. All right, and then you have a familiar phrase in the next structure, and this will just become something that you basically just remember, because it is said so many times in the Old Testament. Thus says the Lord. It's Ko Amar Adonai. And again, as we've mentioned in our class, we pronounce the Yahovah or Yavah. Yavah is also a pronunciation of Yahweh here. And so you can pronounce that word a couple of different ways and be correct. One is Yahovah, the other one is Yahweh, and the other one is Yahweh. But so that we don't fall into the trap of offending our Jewish friends, we pronounce it Adonai, because they consider it taking the Lord's name in vain to actually pronounce the word. Of course, we don't, and so that allows us to be a little bit freer in our teaching and in our explaining. But but we will get into the habit of every time we see Yahweh or Yahovah that we'll pronounce it Adonai. So it is Ko Amar Yahweh. And as we talked about last week, the root verb is typically 3 consonants, about 98% of the time. Your root word will be 3 consonants, and it's always in the 3rd person perfect tense. And so that's what you see here with Amar. And of course the adverb Ko Amar Adonai. Thus says the Lord, or it can be properly translated, thus the Lord has said, as the author discusses for us in his writings. All right, moving on to the next phrase, Vat Dabir, Ha'isha, Laish. All right, so were you able to follow me? That's the question for this lesson. Are you able to follow me? Vat Dabar, sorry, I wouldn't expect you to follow that. Okay, it's Vat Daber, Ha'isha, Laish, and the woman spoke to the man. And the woman spoke to the man. All right, so you see the verb dabar here, and the prefix tet here gives us, tav, the prefix tav, not tet, tet's an earlier T, gives us the indication that it is feminine. And she spoke ha'isha, and the woman spoke. So ha'isha is the subject, and then la gives us an indication that it is the indirect object to the man. All right, she said, the Hebrew again, Lemor, Lek, El, Hanavi. Okay, so let's break this down. We've already talked about Lemor, and then you have Lake, which is the ending Kof, which is that's the ending Kof, which is to you. That ending indicates second person, and it is second person singular, and so you have to say or saying to you unto the prophet El Hanavi. Notice the dogish in the middle of the nun, and the prefix ha. The prefix ha says that it is the prophet. Navi is the Hebrew word for prophet, and so you have the dogish in it. So if you were transliterating this to English, it would be Hannabiy. B-I-Y because of the it'd just be B-I, because the combination of the herrick and the yod there is a single vowel. Okay, single vowel. All right, and then the last sentence here is Vayelek El Natan. All right, so let's read it again. Vayelek El Natan. And so he went to Nathan. And so you see the El again, which indicates the indirect object. And then you see Lake, which means he went. And then Vayelek means he went to Nathan. All right. Again, the important thing is that you're recognizing the structure of the words themselves and the sound, and not so much knowing the grammar at this point. All right, top of page 26. Kashir, Devra. Dev. It's that the female is speaking, so that places the verb in the feminine gender. So it's devar, and then you have the subject coming in after the verb, which is ha-isha. And as we talked about, ha-ish is the man and ha-isha is the woman. Just as a side note, when you're later on, we'll get into Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3 in the Hebrew text, and I think you'll find the use of ish and isha and haya, where Adam and then Adam, which is mankind or man, and God named the first Ish, Adam, and then when Adam called Isha, the woman, Eve, carries with it a lot of the embodiment of the gospel message, which is told to us in Genesis 3:15. So I just wanted to whet your appetite there. We'll get into that in a few weeks. But there's a strong gospel message there in the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. All right, the next phrase is vadabir, elav. Now pay attention to this one. Notice I pronounced the first syllable va. Notice the schwa underneath the yod. So the division of the syllable begins at that point. The schwa tells me to stop pronouncing it as one syllable, but break the word up into 2 syllables. So it's actually 3 syllables. It's va, da, bir. Vada bir. Elav. The temptation here is to confuse the suffix ending vav here as the shurik. And the temptation is to pronounce unto him as Elau, but it's not Elau at all. That ending vav is not the U vowel. It is Elav. So you pronounce it with the V, like it should be pronounced. But it is tempting sometimes to pronounce that as the shurik, and we shouldn't. I guess that almost sounds poetic, doesn't it? Okay, but anyway. All right, the last phrase is Vayishma Hanavi. All right, we already know that Hanavi is the prophet. I won't belabor that point. But Shema means to listen, and the prophet listened. And you'll start picking up on, in a subtle way, the way the author introduces it, is that where the emphasis or the change of the verb is in the prefix, he's changing tenses to the imperfect. Where the endings are on the suffix, then the tense is in the perfect tense. More interesting to us. And notice the box down at the bottom. I ask you to take a look at that this week. Repeat that to yourself. And you see the prepositional phrases of to her, to him, to you masculine, and then to me. So you have lie. Notice the very slight I sound at the end of the H. It is lie. Okay. You're tempted to pronounce it as just la. And if you do, you can actually get by with it, because the pronunciation of the herrick, not the herrick, but the doggish inside the hay is very, very slight. So it is light. And then you have lo, which means to him. And then you have lak, which is to you, feminine. And then you have lak. All right, so you have, notice the schwa underneath the lamed, and that tells you that that is a very quick, hard A sound. All right, it's lak. Okay, and then you have, of course, lie, which is the yod, which is an indicator for me, And then, of course, the lamed there, which is an indicator for the preposition to. All right, top of page 27. Top of page 27. We have several phrases here, and we'll try to go through these fairly quickly. The main thing here, again, is to pay attention to the pronunciation and the syllable, to the syllables. So you have Ba Boker, Natan, Lahi, Et, Ha, Kisuf. All right, so he says, in the morning. We talked about the prefix bait, which indicates the preposition in. So you have in the beginning, boker. Boker means morning, or in the morning. Natan, notice the A sounding underneath it, which is the Gametz Batak, and that's usually an indicator that you're talking about a verb instead of a noun, with the Gametz Batak underneath the consonants. So you have Natan, Lahi, we've just learned that one, to her, and then Et, and we learned last week that Et is the indicator of the accusative case or the direct object. So he's talking about silver, ha-kisuf. Kisuf is the Hebrew word for silver. Ha-kisuf means the silver. All right, so in the morning he gave to her, and notice that to her cannot be the subject here. The indicator that this is the indirect object is the prefix lamed. All right, so you have et ha-kisuf. All right, let's go on down to the next phrase. Vatim, kisuf, gam, li. All right, let's read it again. Vayetan, kisuf, gam, li. Now notice how I changed the pronunciation of the first word. And he gave silver, gam, also to me. All right? There was not a schwa there. When I first pronounced it, I thought there was a schwa there, but there's not a schwa there. All right, so it would be, transliterating that to English, it would be V-A-Y-I-T-T-E-N. Vayetan. Kisuf, kam, li. All right, so you have silver. He gave silver also to me. Just a little side nugget. Notice that kisuf, which is silver here, is the direct object. He gave what? He gave silver, is the direct object, but you don't have the direct object indicator, which is et before it. And I asked my professor at Hebrew University why sometimes the et is used and sometimes the et is not used. You know what his answer was? Because it's the Bible. And the Bible can do what it wants to do. That was his answer. Also, to me, and we know that to me is the indirect object. All right, next phrase. Vayelik el ha'isha. All right, so you have Vayelik el ha'isha. And then he went to the woman. And then you have va da bir. Notice I said va da bir lahi lemor, and spoke to her, saying or to say. All right, so you see the schwa underneath the yod, which makes it va. All right, so we're going to kind of speed up a little bit now. Natan lak hamelech et hakisuf. All right, the king has given you the silver. All right, now notice where we found the king. The king was in the middle of the phrase, hamelech. Did I say that right? Hamelech? Or is it hamelech? It's hamelech. All right, how do I know that? Notice the dogish in the middle of the mem. That gives us an indication that that's a double mem, which means we would translate or transliterate hamelech as H-A-M-M-E-L-E-K. So it'd be hamelech. Hamelech. All right, Natan, lak. All right, let's go down to the next phrase. not na, li hamaleka et hakaref. The queen gave me the sword. And so you have the queen now as the subject of the sentence. So it's hamaleka. Ka on the end of it makes it a feminine instead of masculine. All right. And notice the change in the cough, being from a final cough to one that is not the final, and then there's another consonant added at the end. So you notice the change in form there. All right, next phrase. Valo, not na, li et hakisi. All right, so you have, and she did not give me the throne. All right, notice the phrase not na, ending in the hey, which indicates that it's feminine. So you would translate this and she, and then lo is the Hebrew word for not. So, and she did not give, not na being the verb to give, li, to me what? Which is the direct object, which would be ha kise. So he did not give me the throne. All right, going on to the next phrase, vayelek. All right, continuing on here, phrase, vayelek hanavi el hamalek. All right, so then the prophet went to the king. Notice now the prophet is the subject, and he went unto the king. All right, and then you have the next phrase, which is vadavir. Is it vadavir or is it vadabir? It is vadabir because of the dogish in the middle of the bait. Okay, vadabir, lo, lemor. All right, and spoke to him, saying, or to say, lo, natan, leka, Adonai, el, hakise. All right, so now the Lord now becomes the subject, Adonai. It becomes the subject of the verb. It's lost its feminine ending on the verb. So now it is, instead of not na, it is pronounced natan. Natan, which makes it masculine. So the Lord did not give leka, to you, et hakise, which is the throne. He did not give to you the throne. And then reading the next phrase, va Adonai, Natan, le David, et hakise. So for the Lord has given the throne to David. So we see now David almost looks like the subject of the sentence, but it's not. It's the Lord. And the Lord gave la David, and the reason why we know David is not the subject of the sentence is because it begins with le. Le means to, so that indicates that it's the indirect object. And of course, et being the direct object tells us that he's talking about the throne. He did not give what? He did not give the throne. To whom? To David. All right, so now we have the next phrase, which is vat dabir, elav, gam, ha via, han via. All right, so let's go back and look at it. It is vat dabir. I stopped the syllable at the end of the tav because of the schwa underneath it. And then you have dabir, which we've already talked about. And then again, we see this prepositional phrase here of elav, which we've already talked about, how easy it is to mispronounce it. but it ends in a V sound, and it's unto him. Gam, which is the adverb, also the prophet. All right, or the prophetess. Why is it the feminine prophet? Because of the ending of hey. All right, and then you have the last phrase here, which is Lemor ko amar Adonai. She said, "This is what the Lord has said." So saying ko amar Adonai. Remember earlier in the lecture I said ko amar Adonai is something that you will read frequently in the Old Testament as well as in this text. Okay, as far as review is concerned, at the top of page 3.6, I'm going to read these phrases. I'm not going to comment on these phrases like I've been doing. So I'm going to be reading these phrases. It introduces a little bit more vocabulary, and then we will conclude with this phrase. But I'll just be reading the Hebrew. You follow along with me in Hebrew. I'll still be reading slow. Dabir Lakim Hamalek. Vadabir Lanu Hanavi. Dabir Lakim Vagam Dabir. Lo Vayishma David. Et Dibre. Is it Dibre? It's Divre. Divre. Ha'ish. The man. Eli. Debre. Hanavi. So I'll stop there and ask you, are you with me? I'm about in the middle of this list of phrases. Okay. Vaze, which is demonstrative. It means this and this. Debar. Hamalakim. Ha'ele. Shama. Et. Debar. Hamaka. Hazot. Vatelek. Ha'isha. Hazot. Vat Dabir. Lakim. Et. Devre. Hanavi. Haze. Vegam. Devra. Laish. Valo. Shama. Lai. Ki. Lo. Shama. Et. Devre. Haisha. Shama. Et. Devar. Adonai. Vat. Dabir. Lahim. Legam. Li. Okay, that ends this particular lecture. We'll pick up with the final part of Lesson 3 in the next lecture, and that will get us ready to begin Lesson 4 on the last Thursday night of October. All right, thank you very much.